Welcome to this episode of the Magellan Network Show. In this episode, we are going to do episode number 2 of our summer Scaling Your Practice series. If you're with me in episode number 1, I told you a little bit about my story, how for the first 25 years of my coaching career, I was good enough, did a good job, but never was able to put it together. And then over the last 7 years, have had tremendous growth. And these are the same strategies that I teach all of my wealth manager, financial advisor clients. And for those of you who don't know me, let's not forget this. My name is Coach Joe Lukacs. For 32 and a half years, I've done nothing but coach some of the most successful financial advisors in this space. Many have gone on to become their own thought leaders. And what I'm going to do in this episode is talk about the 3 identities an advisor has throughout their career, and then how to compress time, how to take a 10-year goal framework and compress it down into a 36-month framework. So let's get started. And again, if you didn't watch last week's episode, I highly recommend it'll give you the context, obviously, for this one. Is every advisor has basically 3 hats they wear in their business. Now, I don't care what your business card says, whether it's a wirehouse, an independent, a hybrid, insurance company, full RIA, it doesn't matter. We all have the same 3 hats. And those 3 hats are as follows. And I'm going to give you the meaning of each hat. The first hat is going to be, excuse me, the advisor hat. The second hat will be the business owner hat. And the third hat or identity would be the entrepreneur. And when you think about it, people come in this game and you remember your maybe first year when you're thinking about it. The first thing you have to decide is, did I want to be a financial advisor? Right? That's the first core identity that we have. And look, I don't have a single client that's not a good advisor, but I think I've got clients that are technically brilliant and I've got clients who are just good. And the funny part about that is the advisor identity has the least amount of influence, the least amount on your economic success. And so a lot of times, and again, depends why you're in this game. So if you're in this game because you like doing financial planning and advising, and whether you're going to work inside an organization as a W2 team member or have your own gig, but you're very advisor centric. So in other words, that would become your core identity. That is where, you do the game, you do the reviews, you give advice, you do the plans, you handhold people. That is the advisor chair. And all of us have to have that. Like, I have the coach chair. Okay. So, and I rock star that, right? That's definitely a big part of my core identity. Right. And I never plan to give that up. Now, depending on what your goals are inside your game, some advisors want to over time shrink, diminish, or maybe end their advisor chair because they want to spend more time building out an enterprise, right? An empire, if you will. And so that's going to require more of the other 2 chairs, right? The business owner and the entrepreneur. So again, the advisor chair is the doer, right? It's the advice giver, the review executioner. That's what they do. Now, second identity, if you will, is going to be basically the business owner. And by most people, by the way, this is from my experience, do not like the business owner chair. This is where you've got to do systems and you got to deal with people, your team, right? And you've got to deal with your own balance sheet and your own P&L and taxes and the running of the business, right? If you will. Most people, if you look at like the 3 domains, right? The advisor, the business owner, the entrepreneur, this is the one that is least favored by most people. Now, but it's important, right? You can't go ahead and grow. I don't care if it's even a small ensemble practice without having that business owner chair fill. Now, what's interesting about the advisor and the business owner chair is they are delegatable. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can go hire associate advisors, right? They'll handle blocks of clients in a W-2 and, bonus matter, or maybe a split, with all that's a little bit more old school these days. So could you delegate your advisor chair? Yes, you can, right? Could you delegate the business owner chair? And the answer to that is yes, or most of it. You go bring in, depending on the size of your practice, You go bring in an ops manager, right? And if you're really scaling, you'll bring in a chief operating officer, COO, which they sitting in that de facto business owner chair or bulk of it, right? They are the implementer, and they are the executor of strategy when it comes to running the business. They manage people, they manage processes, they build systems, they make sure the lights stay on. The old saying, lights are on, the light bulbs are ordered, the paper clips are in the drawer, all those things that a business has to have, right? So you can do that. Now, the reality is when you start out in this game that we're all three. So I was a coach, I was a business owner, and the entrepreneur. Okay. If you ask me today which chair I like least, it will be by far the business owner chair, right? It's ops. If you're playing the game, that's you want to find a who for that, right? And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then the third identity or domain, if you will, is the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur is the big thinker. The entrepreneur is the marketing person. They are the business development person. They're the salesperson, right? They're head of strategy. They think big, they dream big, and that's what makes it exciting, right? So we all love our entrepreneurial chair. Now, if you're watching or listening to this and you're like, well, hey, so I'm really like a W-2 advisor. Hey, so your entrepreneur chair is diminished right now. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. These three chairs exist in all, by the way. It's just that your core identity is more advisor than it is business owner entrepreneur. Now, what's it take to scale? So from an identity standpoint, let's look at this, right? And I'm gonna give you some real world examples. So let's just say you're running a $1 million practice, okay? And in that $1 million practice, you have you have an assistant, and maybe you have a hybrid second chair slash associate advisor, right? And let's keep things simple. And let's just say that's about 150 households, 100 mil, 1 point keeps for things. So if you look at that, well, what are the so the 3 chairs, what is that for that advisor sitting in that world, what does that look like? Well, they're still the advisor for the most part, right? They're dealing with the top clients. Yes, they have help with a second chair, and they have a second chair slash associate advisor or hybrid. So the associate advisor is going to deal with the smaller relationships when it comes to economics, right? Because they have an assistant, they also sit basically solely or squarely in the business owner chair, and they're in charge of ops. They have to make sure the staff is there. They're in charge of standards and floors and vacation schedules and benefits and all those things, right? And so, the website, the refreshes, secrets, all that stuff. So in a solopreneur, very small ensemble practice, there's going to be a lot of business owner chair there. And a lot of advisor chair. Okay. And then the entrepreneur chair is there, but it's interesting. It's not there in the way that most people would want it. And why is that? Because they're so busy in the advisor and the business owner chair. So here's the immutable part of it. Everything equals 100, right? So if I go a third, a third, a third, so 33 and a third, 33 and a third, 33 and a third equals 100. I can't go like 105, 110, 115. So, if I'm sitting half the time or 3/4 of the time in the advisor chair, and I'm spending the rest of my time basically in, the business owner chair, it's really hard to think about scaling and building out, a larger ensemble or a small enterprise because you're barely keeping your head above water. And that is the real entrepreneurial conundrum a lot of advisors have is, there's an old saying, what got you here won't get you there. And it's extremely true in advisor land, right? What got you to 1 million won't get you to 3 in my experiences. Now, let's just say you did 1 million and you say, hey, in the next 3 years, I want to get to 3 million or 3 to 4 years, right? And so we start thinking about it. And by the way, it's a common conversation I have. I say, okay, so what do you think that looks like to you? So walk me through, like, what do you think the team, I always talk about the team first. Like, what do you think the team needs to look like? And, we start doing the math. And the first thing advisors do, by the way, and this is usually a mistake, is they'll sit there and say, well, we're going to need to bring on another $200 million. So we're going to need to bring in another 100 households at $2 million averages, right? And I go, well, what's your current average? Oh, 750. So then, again, 150 households, 100, so figure 750. Round. For those of you who do math, I'm close enough. And I said, well, what makes you think? Because historically, you've been attracting, mom and pop, middle America, wealth, right, if you will. What makes you think you're going to now get into a little bit more of the mass affluent at $2 million, right? Walk me through where you get that idea from, and what's the marketing and business development going to look like? Because historically, that's not what you've done, right? And this is the one thing that I want to be very clear with everybody on. We want to solve the math problem, but it's just that it's just a math problem. So what I would do, and this is the way I like to look at things. And yes, there's definitely an evolution. The first couple of years in the business, what you bring in versus the last couple of years in your career, in terms of timelines, it does make a difference. So what I would normally do is let's look at this. Let's look at the last. You could pick a number, no less than 12. 20 is probably better. Let's take the top 20, the last 20 new clients you brought in, and I want to take the top two out and the bottom two out, leaving 16. And then I want to take that 16 because the top two and bottom two are going to be outliers. And I want to look at the 16 and I want to have an average. And that's what I'm going to base my modeling on, is that average, because that's reality. So instead of 100 households at 2 million, we're going to need like 175 households at 1.5 million, and that's fine, right? But now we've got the modeling down. Now, okay, so now what? Well, what does the team need to look like, right? And then this is where we get into the question of how many clients does the advisor founder want to have? Okay. Now, I can tell you that with my clients that have built, let's just talk about maybe 5 million and above, right? My top client will do about 60 million this year in revenue. When you get about a half a bill equals 5 mil on top, your advisor chair has to shrink. It just has to, because you've got to be head of strategy, head of culture. So the entrepreneur chair grows. The business owner chair hopefully also shrinks, because we've got a director of operations or a COO in there. So we're spending more time. So this is the fundamental shift I want you all to get. Instead of doing it, you do it through people. So in other words, instead of, it gets into Ben Hardy's Who Not How, right? Which is, okay, who do I need and how do I empower them so I don't have to do it, right? And this requires a couple things from an identity standpoint. Number one, you got to trust your people. If you can't trust your people, then you have the wrong people. Number two, you can't sweat the small stuff. Micromanagement is the exact antithesis of scaling. So if you want to scale your business and you want to control everything, it does not work, right? I have this, I won't get into names. I have this with a client now who's really scaling their business, but he is a bit of an untrusting micromanager. And guess what? He has cultural problems and he will burn his people out. And he stresses himself out because he's wondering, is he getting everything he can out of his people? Right? Which is a terrible way to look at it, in terms of, in other words, hey, am I getting good return on my investment in terms of salary and comp and benefits and all that? And if you got to question that, then you got to question the chair, the person, or your approach to the business. The one thing I will absolutely tell you, the bigger your business gets, the less you're going to know about it. The bigger your business gets, the less you're going to know each individual client. It just comes with the territory. So if you're very certainty driven, if we look at Tony Robbins' 6 human needs, and certainty is super high on your hierarchy of needs, and you gotta like know everything and be involved in everything. You can push the needle maybe to like 2 million, 2.5 million, but like to go beyond 3 as a micromanager, it is an early grave for most situations. Or you just get burnt out, or you stall out and you get super frustrated because you're no longer the small ensemble lifestyle practice, but you haven't finished your transition either, and it's a sucky place to be. Okay. So so the one thing I want to be very clear on is your practice is a mirror image of who you are inside these 3 domains: the advisor, the business owner, and the entrepreneur. And if you're going to scale, then you have to develop your entrepreneurial identity while shrinking your advisor identity. So most of my clients in that 5 million plus range, we might have 25 to 50 relationships we're primary on, but we have a second chair that will do all the client contacts, even prep the reviews, even do some of the reviews if it's going to be a basic, update review, nothing major is going on. you have to have that chair. Otherwise, you're going to spend too much. So, in other words, we take the advisor chair and we split it. You still sit. I like to say, one cheek is yours, the other cheek is your second chair, right? And you both sit in the chair, and that could work. But once you get like the 5 million, it doesn't work anymore. You're too busy rainmaking, looking for talent, looking for acquisitions, doing culture, doing strategic thinking. You know, putting out fires as leaders do. And so the advisor chair shrinks even more. And I will tell you, I'm not saying you couldn't do it. And look, I'm the coach, the business owner, the entrepreneur. I made a decision several years ago that I would always coach. Even as I build out my business and we add all our AI tools and we're scaling and things like that, I will always have a cadre of personal clients. Why? Because I think you've got to practice, right? I think you've got to practice. And you got to practice the craft and stay sharp. And so I do think, and so if somebody said, one of my clients says, hey, if I want to keep, 10 or 20 clients, would that be a problem if I want to go to $1 billion, slash $10 million? I said, no, it would not be a problem. And I get it, right? And most of these, and look, in that framework, most of those people are friends anyway at this point, right? So it's more relational than it is anything else. So yeah, I mean, you could do it, but you got to have the right support and don't be under the delusion, if you will, that, oh, I can scale this thing to 500 million and keep 150 households. And like, nope. Not if you want to have a good time doing it and have a life. The answer is no, it does not work. Right. So what's next? So with the entrepreneur, right? The entrepreneur likes is the big thinker, the dreamer, the planner, the plotter, if you will. And that skill needs to be developed. And I think every advisor is at some levels entrepreneurial. The question is, you all have the muscle? The question is, do you go ahead and develop that muscle? Do you go ahead and make that happen? And so when you think about, and here's kind of the framework I want you to think about for today. And let's just kind of let's walk through the thesis I just gave you: 1 million to 3 million to 5 million to 10 million, right? So if you're $1 million advisor, you kind of know how you operate. If I was talking to you, I would say, oh, here's the $1 million version of you. Well, what does the $3 million version need to look like? What does the 3 million well, how does what does the $3 million version of you need to think, act, believe? What are they doing? More importantly, what are they not doing, right? And you think through that and you say, okay, well, at the $3 million version, I can't work with as many households. The $3 million version of me has to be a really good leader of people, because I have to build a team out. And this is the key thing. And I hear this a lot. And so I want to take the last few minutes of our episode today and kind of dispel this. I hear this often where people say, I don't like managing people, therefore I can't grow my business. And I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot more than I realized when I was thinking about it the other day. And when I go and ask that question, I say, well, tell me why. And really what it boils down to is, number one, they hired the wrong person, or they hired the right person but didn't empower them, or they're so certainty driven that if it just stresses them out trying to track everything to make sure everything's getting done the way they want it done on the timelines they want, right? And like I said earlier, you just can't scale that. It doesn't work that way. It's a non-starter. So one of the things you've got to really think about is, you see, managing people, that's the business owner chair, right? And like I said, that's a chair not a lot of people love. And if you're sitting there going, well, I don't want to manage people, therefore I won't grow, or I don't want the complexity of it, you're approaching this all wrong. Number one, you hire self-managed people and you empower them and you get out of their way and let them do their thing. That's what you do. That's how you have impact with people. And if you're a manager, certainty driven person, this is why you're struggling to scale. You're trying to control the process, and you're trying to control the people, or I can never find anybody good, or if I find anybody good, they're expensive. And I do want to address this. If you read either 10x is easier than 2x or the science of scaling, there's several references to hiring the rock star, paying 20 to 35% more than market for the who. And I can tell you from my personal experience and my experience with my clients that that is 100% absolutely true. So many advisors they'll say, "I've got oh, I gotta hire an assistant." And so it's the one chair, right? The one chair. And they'll look at a $50,000 year candidate and a $75,000 year candidate. And the $75,000 candidate has, twice the experience, twice the capacity, twice, like the rock star, right? Well, the $50,000 person's good. They're good. So it's not like they're bad. 80 to 90% of advisors will choose a $50,000 person because they think the $75,000 person is too expensive. But yet every study that I've shown, so you hire the rock star, you get a massive return on that investment. And since you don't have an organization of like 30 or 40 or 50 people, you can't hide. So if you got a B player or C player, you can't hide them anywhere. There's nowhere to, like, you can't stick them in a cubicle somewhere and we'll figure it out later. Like, there's only one chair on your team, and it's a fundamentally important chair. So the one thing I would say, especially for some of you younger advisors who are building out your businesses, building out your teams, do not go get the rock star. Go get the A player, right? Invest the extra. It's never a spend. It's an investment. And you've got to stretch a little bit to get the who right. You do that because if you get the wrong one, it'll set you back 6 months to a year at minimum. It'll take you 6 years to figure that out, and then six year, and then 6 months have the guts to let them go, if indeed you even do that. So here's the one critical question I'm going to leave you with today. Look at every member on your team and just ask yourself this one basic. This is the question I ask. Knowing what you know today about the person and their performance, if you could go back in time, would you hire that person again? And if I get silence or like a not, if like I don't get up and like hell yeah I would, and I don't get that, then I know it's a no, and they don't admit it. And once that client says to me, probably not, then we know what we need to do. Then we know. This question is, when do we have the courage and when are we going to be willing to get uncomfortable to make that happen? And I know what some people say, and I just want to be very clear on this too. A lot of, and you can have empathy, and there's another eye of empathy. But let me also say this. Our industry has such a shortage of people, administrative planning chairs, administrative chairs, sales assistants chairs, right? Call it what you want. That the only way a person doesn't work in this industry if they don't want to work. Like there's just a ton of opportunity. So what you're doing by keeping them there is they're not happy, you're not happy, and you're holding them back from finding their dream job because you're afraid to be uncomfortable and have the conversation. They'll be fine. There's plenty of gigs. And if you don't believe me, just go look on I don't care, go look on an Indeed job board, LinkedIn job board, pick any board you like, and see how many open positions there are for associate advisors, administrative assistants, power planners. And trust me, your person will land on their feet, probably probably for more money than you're paying them. So I want you to keep that in mind too. Okay. So hope you found this valuable. Next week will be 4th of July here in the United States. We'll have a little break, but then we get back for the second half of the year. We're going to have part number 3, and we're going to actually now going to get into some of the frameworks on how to grow your business in a massive way and also be compressing time. So again, thank you for listening or watching this episode of the Magellan Network Show. You can find me at coachjoe.guru. You can find my program, magellannetwork.net. Please like today's video, subscribe, leave us a review, forward this to a colleague. Have a great week. See you after the holiday.